What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Alex de Silva podcast. We hope you are well and having an amazing day, afternoon, evening, wherever you are in the world. And welcome to another episode. Remember to like, subscribe, and leave a comment on whatever platform you're listening. Now, let's get on with the show with your host, Alex de Silva.
Okay, so we are live. Welcome, everyone. It's always good to be here. Thank you so much for every single one of you who listen, who tunes in. Today, I have a wonderful guest, Lydia. She is also one of the survivors of cauda equina syndrome, and someone I'm actually really looking forward to talking to today. How you doing, Lydia? Happy New Year. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. And Happy New Year to you too.
Yeah, good to have you on board. We were having a little conversation before we kicked off, and I was quite excited to hear your journey. As you know, mine is only begun last year, September, and this is something that has completely changed my life and every person I've spoken to, and no doubt yours will be very similar. This is very life-changing, and it's something that you can't ever expect, as I've sort of discovered with this. And with that, I'm really interested to sort of understand, how did this come about with you? How long ago, and what happened?
Well, we are one of fortunately a fairly rare group of people. We are 1 in 100,000 people with back pain, back symptoms, who sadly go on to develop cauda equina. And I think that's one of the reasons why there is still some ignorance around the NHS, and myself included. I'm actually an advanced nurse practitioner, and I do see and treat people with back pain, and obviously cauda equina is something that we're always on the alert for, and far more so now, having been a victim, I suppose, or sufferer of it myself. So when I was 49, I was very fit and active, had a long history of being very active, and I was doing a boot camp type exercise in a park with a group of other people on New Year's Eve, just over 7 years ago now. And I'd had a very slight niggle in one of my buttocks, just thinking I had maybe a slight tightness in a glute muscle there, but nothing in particular. Absolutely no back pain whatsoever. And during the exercise, we were doing squats with resistance, and all of a sudden I felt a sharp pain in the back of my left thigh and thought maybe I'd pulled my hamstring. So I left the class, tried to bend down to pick up my rucksack that was on the floor, and felt that I couldn't pick it up, because if I bent that much, my hamstring, which is what I thought the problem was, would snap. Tried to run it off, didn't work, did a bit of stretching, didn't really help. Walked home, and during my walk home, which was very painful, my foot started to flip as I walked. I didn't seem to have much control over my left foot. The day went on, the pain in my leg got worse. It was a burning ache, is how I'd describe it. Contacted my various medical friends, who popped over, gave me prescriptions for all sorts of painkillers, because I thought at this stage, because the pain was increasing, that the hamstring, which I felt that I'd pulled, was now going into spasm. Tried some massage, didn't help, and gradually the pain got worse and worse. And it was now New Year's Eve, was supposed to go out, obviously had to cancel all of that, and found myself just bent over a stool in my lounge trying to deal with the pain, having taken everything from Oromorph to diazepam to cocodamol. I'd taken the lot, and the pain in my leg was excruciating. And it probably wasn't until about 3 o'clock in the morning on New Year's Eve that I suddenly realised that I hadn't actually been for a wee for hours, despite having been awake and drinking. I'd just been focusing on trying to deal with the pain, hadn't wanted to go to A&E. New Year's Eve, carnage, thought that would be a nightmare. So at about 3 in the morning, I thought I need to go and have a wee, because I hadn't had a wee since, I don't know, about 12 hours previously, probably. Tried to get up, found that I couldn't get up. I'd lost the use of my left leg at this stage. So crawled to the bathroom and was unable to have a wee, had no sensation of needing a wee at all. At which point I contacted my partner and said, look, we're going to have to go to A&E, because I now actually think I might have something called cauda equina. It was only at that stage when I realised that I'd lost all bladder sensation and all ability to have a wee, that it occurred to me, with my medical background, that I might have cauda equina. And I think one of the reasons it didn't occur to me earlier is because throughout the whole of this process, I have had absolutely no back pain at all at that point. It was only the pain in my leg. So he kind of carried me to A&E. Fortunately, although it was quite busy, I think the obvious distress that I was in with the pain and the fact that I couldn't stand up, I couldn't walk, meant that I was seen very, very quickly. I was examined very quickly. The on-call neurologist immediately felt it was cauda equina. I had no anal tone when they examined me. I had a completely full bladder with no sensations. I was catheterized. And my the hospital then put the spinal unit down in Bristol on alert. And then we just had to wait for 9 o'clock for the MRI to be open. Had an emergency MRI that came through. Results went straight to Bristol. They were on standby, and then it was blue light down to Bristol and straight into theatre. And a bit like yourself, when I woke up, I had no pain, which was great, which was amazing, because the pain had been pretty horrific. I think by the time I got to A&E, they were unable to give me any more analgesia, because at that point I'd taken so much myself. I'd got pinpoint pupils, so and I was still in agony, and I couldn't even get on the bed because it was just too uncomfortable. And I remember being in the MRI and press the button because I just couldn't lie down for the scanning. And they said, oh, you've got to stay still. We've only done your neck. And I'm saying, why the hell have you done my neck? It's my bloody leg that's the problem. What are you doing up there? I can't do this. I can't lie here. But somehow I managed to, and they got the scans they needed and went straight into surgery. But I still had no use of my leg when I came out, and I still had no bladder or bowel function at that stage. Was in hospital for about 5 days, maybe a week, and then was discharged once physio had been and had made sure that with the combination of my leg in a splint and crutches, because I still had use of my right leg, which was fortunate, that I could sort of manage steps. And I only had 4 steps up to my flat at that time. So I was lucky that I could navigate that. And then the rehab journey started, really, which is absolutely key and critical to regaining as much function as is possible. And that first year to 2 years is the window of opportunity in which to try and regenerate and re-engage damaged nerves. I believe after 2 years, it's increasingly difficult. So I think the absolute takeaway from all of this for anybody is, if you're near the beginning of your journey like you are, Alex, then absolutely do everything you can to maximize your rehab during this time. I definitely took my rehab as a full-time job. I couldn't work when I was still in a lot of pain actually with my leg. Although the pain immediately after surgery went, I then did have quite a lot of residual nerve damage. And unfortunately for me, I went on to reherniate what was left of my disc a further 3 times.
Wow.
So I ended up going right back to the beginning. on 3 further occasions. So I had to start the whole process again, and each time. And then eventually, on the 5th occasion, they fused my spine. And that has been a game changer for me. It's taken away all the back pain that I then developed back pain afterwards, mainly to the facet joints. And we can talk about that a bit later.
Yeah. Wow. And this is the thing that for me, I find so interesting as I'm speaking to people, is everybody's journey. Not one person is the same.
Yeah.
And every symptom as well. And I think, and I'd love to get your professional take on this, because even the diagnostic around it as well, when people are going through this, every person is so different. Everybody's is affected in a very different way. Like yours, mine was in a space of a week. It just gradually, I had back pain around about June last year, and I had a car accident. But just before that, I was training with a friend, like you, very fit. I've always loved training, and I've always had lower back issues. I did martial arts for years, and I've always been competitive, and so that for me was something which was quite normal. I was like, oh, it's just back pain. I've pulled a muscle, the usual things. But I've always been very careful, very mindful of, looking after myself, getting the right rest, seeing the right people, because I know how important the back is, and I want to make sure that for me, it's all about longevity. I don't need to be a superhero, although sometimes I think we all think, we're indestructible. And I, discovered, through time, I was just thinking, well, it's back pain. I started seeing a chiropractor, and over time got a little bit better. And then actually, if anything, it just got worse. But for me, it took a week for it to, as I said, I started that sciatic pain. It was just, I remember mentioning it to the chiropractor and saying to them, is this normal that I'm getting just very light shooting pains on either side, both sides of my glutes, and just on the side of each leg, just above the ankle? I said to them, is that normal? And I've known, because I've had sciatica before, so I know how to floss and I know some of the things to do. Like, yeah, it's completely normal. It's just as we're realigning you, blah, 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 just a nose. I said, okay, trust the professionals. And then it was just that week before where it kicked in. It took the week, for that to happen. And as I said, for me, I lost sensations on both feet. But a friend of mine, who's a physio, who took me to A&E on a Monday, because the ambulance refused to take me on a Friday. They said to me, look, it's just sciatica.
Yeah.
You'll be absolutely fine. Just take some painkillers. And although my right foot had dropped by that point, and my groin had started to go numb. But by Monday, by the time I got to A&E, which from where I live to A&E is only a 10-minute car ride, my left foot had dropped. So by this point, both foot, I was unable to walk. So it is really fascinating, isn't it, how everybody's completely different, and that journey can just take, like with you, it seems like it was just 24 hours, and that's it. He just grabbed you. How difficult is that from a professional perspective, I guess, and you being in the industry, for that to be diagnosed? Because, we hear sometimes in the groups as well, where some people have been misdiagnosed and, they've had to wait a lot longer. And then it got to the point where they've lost complete sensation. And as I began to sort of understand, is you have that kind of 24, 48-hour window.
Yeah.
Where you've got to be very mindful. And I think that's when you've got to, operate, especially if you're losing bowel and bladder control as well. With that in mind, and seeing how all of our experiences are so different, how difficult does that make it for the professional to be able to diagnose it?
I think it is a very difficult thing to diagnose, because everybody's journey, as you rightly say, and everybody's symptoms actually can really vary quite significantly. I think before I had cauda equina, I always assumed that you had to have back pain. Everybody with cauda equina would definitely have some form of back pain. I had absolutely no back pain whatsoever until afterwards. Then I developed a lot of back pain. But at the time, I had no back pain. It was just the pain, predominantly in my the back of my thigh.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing I think that was a surprise to me was that we always talk about loss of bladder and bowel control,
Mm-hmm.
and most people assume that means incontinence. But actually, it doesn't necessarily mean incontinence. It can also mean retention, which was what happened to me. The muscles wouldn't work, and so I just retained urine. I wasn't incontinent at any stage, quite the opposite. So certainly for me, two lessons I learned through my own experiences: one, don't always assume that someone with cauda equina is going to have back pain, because they may not, although they usually do, but they may not. And secondly, it's any form of change in bladder and bowel control, whether that be for men, it might even present a little bit like a urinary tract infection, passing small amounts of urine more frequently, poor flow, hesitancy for men, having difficulty getting going, and for women it could be incontinence, it could be retention, again, small frequent urination, or big gaps between. And I think the main things that we always ask for people with back pain, sort of what we call the red flags, are any loss of feeling or sensation to your what we call saddle area, saddle anesthesia, which is around the genitals and the groin and the pelvis, or any loss of feeling or sensation in the leg. You can test reflexes, because with cauda equina, the reflexes will go. So, for example, I'm sure it would have been the case for you, certainly the case for me. I had no reflex in my foot at all, and nor my knee either. So you can test for reflexes. One simple test that I get patients to do is I get them to stand onto the balls of their feet, because with cauda equina, it's very common, not always, but very common, to get foot drop. And if you get foot drop, you will lose the ability to stand onto the balls of your feet. So when examining a patient, that's one thing I always get them to do. So the red flags are really around change of bladder bowel control and loss of feeling or sensation in a leg. And if the answer to that is yes, then I think you always have to be alerted to the possibility of a severe disc herniation that could be cauda equina, or is certainly at risk of becoming cauda equina, at which stage I tend to then refer. I may be more cautious than some of my colleagues, having experienced it myself, especially as I didn't follow a typical pattern.
Yeah. And this is something which I guess we've all got to be mindful around, as a patient, and then also from a professional perspective. Is there a way, and I'd love to ask you, is there a way in which, I guess from a professional perspective, there is further training around this? Because it doesn't seem that there is a lot of information out there. Like, everybody that I speak to just has no idea what it is. And from a professional perspective, how much, I know that I guess you get taught about it, but I guess it's not something which is, because it's very rare. Is there any training? Is there something that, I guess, especially for you, where you've gone through it yourself now, you've kind of had to, you've had this experience. Is there something that the NHS as a whole can do in order to be more aware of it, to be able to kind of diagnose it sooner? Is there something that we can do, possibly, in your opinion?
Yes and no, in as much as it is very difficult. I mean, although I have sent probably half a dozen or so, maybe slightly more, patients to A&E with suspected cauda equina, I have not yet in my clinical history ever had a single patient who has had cauda equina. And to put it into perspective, I see 36 patients a day, and I've been doing this I've been working as an advanced nurse practitioner now for over 20 years. In the average course of a GP's lifetime, they are likely to come across clinical lifetime, that is, of working, bearing in mind that that could be, 35, 40 years of clinical work, they're likely to see on average one patient.
Wow.
So it's very rare. That doesn't mean that's okay to miss it. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't put resources into it. But obviously, because the consequences of missing it are catastrophic to somebody, can be catastrophic to somebody's life. So I think, yes, training and awareness is always really important. And I would always advocate any patient that feels able to speak to their GP about volunteering themselves and their experience, to speak to in GP forums, because we do have forums, we do have meetings, clinical meetings on various subjects, through their neurologist or orthopedic surgeon, depending on who, spinal neurologist or orthopedics, depending on who did their surgery. Always, if you want to volunteer to speak to a group of clinicians, to share your stories and your experiences, to heighten awareness. I think for me locally, two things that I found invaluable in my road to recovery. The first was hydrotherapy. I think when I very first had NHS physio, which was arranged for as soon as I was discharged, it wasn't that easy to find a physio within our group of physios at our local hospital that had a special interest in spinal, sort of physio. I think if you're lucky enough to have access to places like Stoke Mandeville or the Spinal Centre in Salisbury, then that's brilliant. Absolutely push for that if it's within your locality and take advantage. I live in the Cotswolds, and I'm not near a big centre. I did have my surgery in Bristol, but that's an hour away from me. So physio was arranged locally. So the physio was okay, but it wasn't really very specialist. So I pushed very hard to get referred for hydrotherapy. And hydrotherapy physio was absolutely the best thing for me, that helped me to eventually regain the use, more or less, of my left leg, because a bit like yourself, I'd been very fit and active. I was absolutely determined that this was not going to be the end of my story. This was not going to be my journey. I went through a process of grieving for my previous life and all the things I'd wanted to do, because the changes were huge. Was I going to be able to go back to work? Could I do my job? Was I going to be able to exercise again? And all of those things. So as well as going to physio, hydrotherapy once a week, I then went to the local swimming pool every day. I was hoisted in and out of the water because I couldn't mobilize sufficiently to get myself in and out of the water. I couldn't get up steps and walk on slippery ground. That was just, wheelchair to the hoist in the water. Did it every day. It was my full-time job. And I would see people at hydrotherapy who'd go every week, and they would expect improvement from just doing their exercises once a week. And it's like, and they weren't making progress. And it's like, well, you're not going to make progress. You have to work so hard at this if you really want the outcome, because your window for change and improvement is small. So maximize it and throw everything you can at it. So I've worked very hard with my local physiotherapists to campaign to get the post cauda equina treatment pathway changed. So I had the hydrotherapy, which was amazing, and the most important thing for me, I didn't unfortunately get access to specialist bladder and bowel physiotherapists till over a year later, when I was dealing with a small amount of fecal incontinence, not loads, but and it was just a little bit, but it was and an inability to control farting, and having no warning that I maybe was going to break wind. And
Mm.
of course, when you're in a clinical setting and you're examining patients, I was now back at work, and you've got to bend down to look in a patient's ears or something. It could be really embarrassing if all of a sudden you break wind. You'd got no notice of that. And so just dealing with little things like that were actually, quite embarrassing for me. So I did eventually get referred to a specialist bladder and bowel physio, and it has helped a bit. And tried all sorts of things, from plugs to physio exercises and nerve stimulators for the bowel and all sorts of things, and I have got better. So for me it was bowel control. My muscles are still very weak, and so if I were ever to get diarrhea and vomiting, there's absolutely no way I could go anywhere near work with diarrhea. Not that I would anyway, but I would have just zero control. And I still have very high residual volumes in my bladder, so I'm supposed to do intermittent self-catheterization twice a day, just to get rid of the residual volumes to reduce the risks of infection. But I have control of my bladder. I don't have any incontinence or anything. But so I think the two things for me that I've worked on locally is access straight away to specialist bladder and bowel physiotherapists and hydrotherapy, because I think if you can get the right intervention early on, you give yourself the best chance of recovering from the nerve damage as much as you're ever going to be able to. And that obviously, as you know, varies hugely from one person to another.
Yeah, really does. And that's something which for me, I've been, my wife and I, we do a lot of research. Her in particular, she's incredible. Whilst I was in hospital, my number one thing, like yourself, was to get back on my feet, because I can only go home if I could do stairs. So that was my goal. It became a full-time job. And I remember having a notepad with me, and I wrote out pretty much my day was, get up, have breakfast, have a call with the family, and then start my exercises throughout the whole day. And I'd just be exercising, whether that be walking up and down a hallway or, and then it became a thing now where I'd just be walking up and down, say hello to everybody. But like you, I didn't give myself a choice to say, this is it. I didn't accept the fact that in my head was, this is me. I'm never going to walk again. Absolutely not. That is not a choice for me. And I think because I gave myself just one opportunity, there is just one opportunity for me, and it's to recover 100%. And I just did everything that I could and continue to still to do everything that I can to continue improving. And I think, a lot like you, it's so important to know and understand the things to do, especially, for us, bowel, bladder, obviously, how can we then do everything that we can to start mobilizing, to start walking, to build strength. Because when things switch off, it's about, okay, how do we re-engage those muscles? How do we switch things back on again? How do we, what can we do about it? And these were the questions for me. And there were certain things from, I guess, my training days of CrossFit, martial arts, and, and always having a passion around these things that helped. But I was limited from a physio perspective, understanding the nerves. How does that work? And I'd love to understand, because you mentioned the importance of, the kind of that first year or 2 years. Why is that so important? Because this is something I'm really interested in, because I'm still new in, for me, it only happened in September 23. So selfishly, and also the people listening, take note, because this is obviously something really important. So what is it about the first year and 2 years that is so important for us to do all that we can in order for us to get, as close to that 100%, if not 100%, recovery? And of course, I know things take time. But But if we have that time on our hand, like yourself, you kind of made it a bit of a full-time job, you know, to get the results that you need. Why is it so important?
It's really important because unlike muscles and bones, which tend to repair themselves over a period of sort of 6 to 8 weeks, depending on our age, obviously it takes longer as we get older, nerve damage and repair takes a lot longer. Nerves are very, very sensitive. You know, we've probably all had a nasty cut or maybe an operation where we've got a scar, and actually the area around that scar can feel numb for a really long time, and sometimes never reoccurs. Now, even if so in cauda equina, the reason it becomes such an emergency is because the disc herniates to such an extent that it not just presses or touches the cauda equina nerves in the spinal cord, but it presses against them so hard that they start to lose their blood supply and they start to die, which is why the decompression is so important within 24 to 48 hours to restore that blood supply back to the nerves to try and prevent permanent damage. Because once you've cut off their blood supply for 48 hours, the chances of getting that nerve to recover are extremely low. So that's why surgery so quickly is important. But even if we release the pressure on those nerves, for however long they've been compressed, they've been under severe stress, and nerves are very sensitive, very delicate things that don't respond very well. There's no toughness in them like a bone. You know, you can knock a bone a load and bruise it and maybe slightly crack it, but to obliterate a bone is really hard. But to obliterate a nerve is not hard given the right set of circumstances. And they're quite delicate. But within that first year to 2 years, nerves do have regenerative properties. We can, with the right form of stimulation, we can get them to regenerate, to grow, and to recover. But once it's been unstimulated and pretty much dead or dormant for over 2 years, the opportunity to stimulate and to regenerate that nerve is greatly reduced. It's not impossible. You will still get tiny gains, but the big gains are in the first 2 years. And even if, like you and I, you know, we started our journeys initially maybe in a wheelchair or certainly on crutches and in splints and things like that, there is still massive hope of being able to significantly improve that situation with a lot of work and stimulation. And again, if you're in a wheelchair, your opportunity for physio at home is quite limited, which is another reason why hydrotherapy is so important, because you get in water and you can move in a way that you can't when you're in a wheelchair. But it's really important to do all of those exercises, however depressed and down and miserable you feel, because a lot of people will still have a lot of pain that they're dealing with. And, you know, getting used to bladder and bowel issues and the lack of mobility, and depression is a big thing. And when we get depressed, it's really hard to be motivated. So trying to develop sufficient mental toughness to concentrate on the rehab side of things is very difficult, but it's absolutely essential and so worthwhile doing, because there is so much possibility for improvement if you can just galvanize yourself enough to try and do that. And even if it's just you focus on today I'm doing this and tomorrow I'm doing that, just take it one day at a time. But you know, please don't give up, you know, because it, you know, for some people their life sadly will be in a wheelchair and there's nothing that they or anyone can do, and that's desperately sad. But there is a huge room of improvement for an awful lot of people.
Yeah, that is very true. And for you mentioned there are certain things which, you know, which people can do. One of the things which naturally came to me, I guess, because I'm just generally a very inquisitive person, and when my feet were completely numb, I started to just massage myself, just massaging my legs, just rubbing where everything was numb. And it was very interesting how how quickly things started to sensation, especially around my legs, around the back of my legs. There are certain areas that still feel a little bit numb, but thankfully a lot of it has come back. But there is still, a lot of work there that needs to be done. Like I said, both my feet are still weak. My left foot is completely still dropped. I still feel on the inside when I try to move my feet, when I kind of command my left foot to move on the inside, I feel like, I guess, the nerve is twitching, if that makes sense. But there's nothing there just yet. But I don't give up. So one of the things I'd like to, because it's easy, and that's something which I could have very easily fallen into, as you mentioned about depression.
Yeah.
I came out of the op, and the first thing I was so grateful for is the fact that I was not in pain anymore, because, as you mentioned, I actually didn't have back pain. What developed for me was the sciatica. So
Yeah.
it was that nerve pain, but it was so excruciating that at one point, my wife knows me. I've always been a very, very strong person, very sort of determined, very kind. And she's never seen me so vulnerable and in a position where I was in so much agony and so much pain. I was in the bedroom, and I was on the floor wailing. I was crying so much that at one point I thought I was going to pass out. So for me, coming out the other end and going, oh my God, I'm in no pain. That for me in itself, even now, like, it still makes me a little bit emotional, because I was like, thank God. But I do, but this is where I sympathize with people who are in pain, because we know what that can feel like. But from a stimulus perspective, you mentioned there are things that people can do without kind of falling into the depression, which, as I said, is something that we can easily fall into. And I had that opportunity there when I woke up and went, oh my God, my legs have gone. Everything switched off. And
Yeah.
it's incredible when you wake up and, because of the weight training I did, my legs were pretty strong. I had very strong legs. So I wake up and I look down and I was like, oh my God, my legs have turned into twigs. What the hell has happened? And
Yeah.
then, you realize that when the muscles switch off, it's incredible how that just happens.
Yeah.
And that in
And you
itself,
lose it so quickly. You can
yeah.
lose muscle mass and things very quickly. But from a stimulation point of view, any form of stimulation is good. So any form of exercise that the physio gives you, however tiny, even if it's just looking at your toes and trying to command them to move and sending those signals as a stimulation, massaging is really good. Getting a almost like a foam roller.
Mhm.
And also you can get those balls, which are rubber balls, which have got slight spikes on them.
Mhm.
And you'll probably feel a real difference between putting them under your thigh or buttock on one side to another side, because on the side that's dead, you won't be able to tell the difference whether it's a tennis ball or a ball with spikes, because you just won't feel it. So any form of external stimulation in terms of massage, foam rollers, hot, cold, ice, heat, anything to stimulate nerves is good, as well as much functional movement as you possibly can, whether that be just sitting on the sofa and trying to move your foot up and down, even if it's not really wiggling, just really concentrating on doing that every day. And just so that those nerves are getting those signals from the brain, even if they're not getting through today, there'll be a day when hopefully they will. And if you're able to walking as much as you possibly can.
Yeah, no, and that's really interesting, because that's how I started. Was exactly the same. Just kept looking at my feet and just said, come on, move, wiggle, wiggle. And I do that every single day. I don't have anything else to do, and I think if there's something I'd say to people. I remember bringing my laptop with me to the hospital thinking, oh, I'm going to work. And like, I've got no business doing anything. This is the last thing I want to focus on, is getting stressed about working or doing anything. And I dedicated that time. Still now, this year, I'm ready now to start doing a little bit of work. But my main focus still is recovery. is getting better, getting stronger, and really, really focusing. Talk to me about your recovery journey, because I know you sort of touched on it, and you did the hydro. How long was it for you? Because again, one of the things which I'm learning more and more about, and this is just, interest, and obviously for the listeners as well, there is not really a timeline with this. This is something which I was a little bit disappointed and frustrated with my consultant when he came and stood at the end of my bed and said to me, "You'll be home by Friday." This is on a Wednesday, and he said, "Right, you're going to be home by Friday. Um, you'll start to get sensations within 8 weeks. By the 12th week, you should be able to start driving, and within 3 to 4 months, you'll be able to go back to the gym." And I'm looking down at myself, going, "What is this guy on?" And I kept saying to him, "Look, this can't be possible, because my feet have gone dead, my legs are jelly, the muscles that I had have completely switched off. Like, are you sure this is the case?" So as we've kind of learned, every case is very different. And how was that kind of timeline for you? Because it's been 7 years, right? So post-op for you,
Yeah.
it's now 7 years. Um, how long was it until, for you, I guess, because you only had foot drop on one side.
Yeah.
Um, how was that kind of journey? And you mentioned about bowel and bladder as well. Take me through kind of that journey, and how was your recovery?
I think I was a little bit unlucky in my recovery, because it's taken a long time, because I had a lot of setbacks. I was doing all of my rehab and slightly getting better. I managed to get myself from crutches down to one stick and down to just an ankle brace for the dropped foot rather than a whole leg brace. So I still had what we call a prancing gait, which was where I walked by using my upper thighs and lifting my legs, a bit like a prancing horse does in dressage, because I couldn't walk properly. And then, unfortunately, I still have some pain. And then that pain got a lot worse again, and my legs started to become very painful, and my foot drop increased. My GP was very good, very on it. I had another scan, and what had been left of the disc had re-herniated and was again pressing on the spinal cord. So I had to have another surgery, came out of that, had lost the use of my leg again, was back to a wheelchair, and then crutches, etc., and started the whole rehab process all over again. About another 3 to 6 months later, it happened again. So again, I'd got myself to a reasonable stage of recovery, and again, the disc re-herniated. So further surgery, back to square one. And this happened on 4 occasions. And every time the rehab got harder, mentally it got harder, because, it's kind of what you don't know. So when you're stood at the bottom of that mountain you've got to climb, and you're full of determination at the first time you climb it, you kind of, ignorance is bliss. You don't know what's ahead of you, and trying to be positive, and you're going to do this. Once you've done it, you know how incredibly hard it is, and how much it takes out of you, both physically, in terms of time, tiredness, fatigue, but most importantly, I think actually mentally, how tough it is to keep going through those really dark days that we all have. So to have to do that 4 times over a period of probably 3 years was extremely difficult. Eventually they fused my L5-S1, and fortunately since that, which would now be 4 years ago, I haven't had a recurrence of any problem. In between all of that, I had excruciating facet joint pain, which was extremely painful. So I had a procedure called rhizolysis or rhizolysis, which is where they go into the facet joint and they burn the nerve that causes the pain. So they destroy it. It can grow back. So rhizolysis may only last 2 years, but it can last 5 years, or for sometimes it can last a lifetime. Because I'm in my mid-50s now, I'm hoping the fact my nerves won't be quite so great as regenerating. So I'm really hoping that particular nerve doesn't grow back,
Yeah.
because the facet joint pain I got afterwards was extremely, extremely painful. I also, in between in that journey, got something called discitis, which is an infection within the disc. So I was in hospital for 3 months on IV antibiotics to treat that. So haven't had a particularly easy journey. Except that I only had one leg that was affected. So I think since the fusion, which for me was a game changer, it's completely got rid of any back pain I had. I still have some residual sciatic pain in my left leg, I think, from the nerve damage, and I think I will always have that. I only take amitriptyline at night for that, because I believe that if you can sleep well and then you can deal with pain during the day. I have things like a sit-stand desk at work, so I stand for some of the time, I sit, I vary my position, and all of these little things really help. So once I had the fusion and I didn't have any further problems, I think my rehab took probably about another year after that in terms of my leg strength. And about 3 years ago, I started doing a bit of running again. Not that I would tell my surgeon. Now, I have a very ungainly style of running because I still have some foot drop. And as I get tired, that foot drop increases.
Right.
And whenever I had MRI scans, you could see the muscle wastage in the left side compared to the right. I'm now training for the London Marathon, and I'm using a personal trainer once a week who is working specifically and only on strengthening my left leg. And actually, I have been amazed that 7 years down the line, despite a huge discrepancy in strength between my right and left leg, that actually I have made improvements in strength in my left leg, which I really never thought that I would. I really thought that the nerve damage was such that the muscle strength in my left leg would never really recover. It may not be as strong as my right, but hey, we've all got one-sided dominant strength. But I have been amazed at how much working on functional strength in the gym with a personal trainer has improved the strength in my left leg, so I'm hoping I get to the I get to the start line in April, and B, I then get to the finish line. But and in terms of bladder and bowel function, I think, as I touched on before, I do intermittent self-catheterization twice a day just to get rid of residual volumes. Most people will probably start to feel the urge to go to the loo for a wee when they've got about 200 mils in their bladder, and 400 mils is considered, a full bladder, really. I probably have to get to at least 400 mils before I have any sensation of needing a wee, and I can certainly hold up to 650 without a problem. So I probably have a very much stretched bladder now, just because of the lack of sensation, which means it probably fills more than it should do, which is why the self-catheterization is important, so that I don't have a reservoir of stale urine for long periods of time, which set up infection. So I haven't made anything like as much progress with bladder and bowel issues over the 7 years as I have with leg function and strength. I think that's partly because I didn't get access to specialist bladder and bowel physiotherapy till well over a year into my journey, and then I had kept getting recurrent problems, which I don't think helped. So for me, improvement in bladder and bowel function hasn't been great. The progress there has been far less, but the improvement in my mobility and leg strength and being able to walk and now run has been huge.
That's amazing. And do you, for your left foot, do you still wear the ankle splint, or are you now in a position where you're strong enough to run without?
I don't wear it.
Mhm.
I am actually now debating whether to wear it for my running, because I'm now up to about 22 kilometers in my training,
Mhm.
and the foot drop is becoming really quite noticeable. And the
Mhm.
problem with that is that because I'm now having to be very conscious about lifting my left leg so that
Mhm.
I don't trip,
Mhm.
um, I'm actually starting to get some hip and knee pain on the right side, which I
Right.
think is carrying
Mhm.
my left leg.
Mhm.
So I am actually seeing a physio next week about
Mhm.
whether or not I should start running with the splint on
Mhm.
in order to protect against the foot drop. So
Yeah.
it's not an easy journey by any stretch of the imagination. I
Mhm.
really hope that I do get to be able to do the amount of kilometers needed for the London Marathon.
Mhm.
I'm more than okay with if I only run halfway and have to walk the
Mhm.
final half, then
Mhm.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, foot drop when I get fatigue with running is an issue. And like I say, I don't have a normal running style by any
Yeah.
stretch of the imagination.
But just the fact that, you're doing it, that in itself is incredible, and
Thank you.
and then what an achievement to be able to train, excuse me, to be able to train for something like that as well, because the London Marathon is, it's an achievement, to be able to do something like that. And especially after going through what you've been through as well, and not just the cauda equina, having to repeat issues that you've had with your spine, and
Yeah,
and all the other complications as well. I think it's, to me, it just goes to show that the determination, your strength in mind, body, just to be able to just not give up, which I think, that's such an important, but also as well a very encouraging message for a lot of people, because as we mentioned, this is something which is so unpredictable, because 1 minute, your everything feels great. Just before Christmas, I think it was about 2-3 days before Christmas, as you know, bowel and bladder for us is something which, is a bit of an issue. And
yeah,
every now and then, even just before we got started, it's like, oh, I'm so sorry. I really need to go. And when you need to go, you need to go.
yeah,
And I went, and the kids are talking to me, and we're just chatting away. And I was like, okay, cool, done. Went to just bend forward to pick up because I'm having to wear a pad at the moment, because I'm still, things leak sometimes with the bladder. Bowel seems to be okay as well, but I went to just pick up my pants and, and shorts, and all of a sudden I pulled my back. And I was like, oh my God. And my wife then came running in. She's like, are you okay? And I said, yeah, I think I've just pulled a muscle on my back. Obviously, panic sets in slightly,
yeah,
because I've never been through this before. This is something which is not usual. So I phoned the GP, doctor phones, had a conversation with him, explained where everything is. And he said, look, I'm looking at your MRI scan, because I demanded a post MRI scan,
okay,
because whilst I was at the hospital, and we were very fortunate that my wife's a psychotherapist, and one of her clients, um, his mum and dad are both in the professional field as well. He's a surgeon in the field. So he's kind of done cauda equina surgeries before. So he was a huge help to us
great,
in, whilst I was in hospital. And one of the things I'd mentioned, it was my right foot. I started to get severe pain down my leg again. So I said to them, look, what's going on? And thankfully we had this consultant. Anyways, cut the story short, he said, look, demand a post MRI scan. Eventually they did one, because there were a few things they messed up at the hospital, unfortunately, with a number of things. And so with that, I demanded that they do a post MRI scan, just to be on the safe side, especially with everything that had happened before. Everything came back perfectly, thank God. So he was looking at the MRI scan and said, look, everything's perfect. It just seems like it's a muscle. Now, for most people will go, oh my God, this is such a nightmare, which, don't get me wrong, it's a pain in the ass when you can't walk anyway. When you pull a muscle on your back, that in itself is, is a pain. But for me, I actually laughed and said to him, "Do you know what? Brilliant." Because for me, it means that the muscle is switching on.
Yes,
Because
you can
everything,
actually feel the muscle.
this is it. And I laughed, and my wife came home. She popped out really quick. She came home. She went, "Is everything okay?" And I said, "Yeah, it's just muscle pain. I pulled a muscle on my back."
Yeah.
And
But I
and
have
I laughed.
muscles.
But I
Yay.
have muscles. Yeah, this is it. I was like, "Oh, they switched on." He's like, "Oh, that's good news." But like you, thankfully, I got some very strong painkillers, and I also have a CBD oil, which is very strong CBD oil. And if there's one thing I recommend to anybody with nerve pain, because one of the things I started to get as well is as I'm demanding, my feet to wake up on my left
Mm.
foot, just that as this was happening with my back, my left foot at the top of my left foot on just by the pinky, I started to get this shooting nerve pain at the top of my foot, and it started one evening whilst I was asleep, and I got up at like 3:30 in the morning, and then literally could not go back to sleep. So I've got this CBD, which you don't need a lot of because it's very,
Which
very strong.
helps. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's really, really helped. And that's something I recommend to people as well. If you're a little bit mindful, cautious about taking painkillers, strong CBD
Yeah,
helps
it's
helps with
definitely, I
sleep
think
and helps with the nerve.
if my nerve pain became severe again, hopefully, it's at a level, it's there. And when
Hmm.
I'm tired I mean, I'm going to be flying long haul
Hmm.
next month. So actually I'm speaking to my GP this afternoon. I will ask for a sleeping tablet just
Hmm.
for the flight,
Hmm.
because I've done that before, because I cannot sit on a
Yeah.
long haul
Mm.
flight for the duration, because the pain just builds up in my leg and becomes
Yeah.
unbearable. I can't
Mm.
sit for long periods of time.
Yeah.
And with the running, I have to be careful of blisters on my left foot because I still have numbness there. But I
Hmm.
think one of the biggest issues for me with running has been bowel control.
Right.
Runners anyway can get what they call runner's trots.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
for me, it's a real issue, and I've tried all sorts of things, to try and minimize the occurrences of accidents which
Hmm.
have happened.
Hmm.
Um, and I've now worked out that if I use a suppository to empty everything out the day before,
Hmm.
then I'm okay. So I've
Yeah.
managed to work out what worked. No point doing it that day, because then unfortunately you get
Yeah.
residual accidents. So if you do it the
Hmm.
day before, certainly for me, that has
Hmm.
been the answer
Yeah.
to then manage the running without those problems.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's so many things that you have to do as a workaround, unfortunately, but there are
Yeah.
works around it. And I kind of want to say to people that for those really unfortunate people who are in a wheelchair, and I feel desperately sad for them that they are, I don't want them to think that that's because they didn't work hard enough at their rehab, or that there's anything that they didn't do or could have done that would have made a difference, because I'm absolutely certain that for a few people there was absolutely nothing that could have changed that really tragic outcome. I just want to try and encourage people that do have some degree of mobility that you and I both had, in terms of being on splints and crutches and things, that actually for those people there is a huge amount of progress that's possible. And there may well be for some people in wheelchairs too. I just don't want people who are in wheelchairs 4 or 5 years later to think that it's because somehow or another they didn't work hard enough at their rehab, because for some people that absolutely isn't the case, and
Yeah.
there's nothing that could have been done.
Mm.
But I think they are the minority.
Yeah.
Sadly they are the minority, and in a way, thank goodness, because it would be awful for
Yeah.
too many people to end up like that. And
Mm.
my heart absolutely goes out to the people in those tragic circumstances. But
Yeah.
for an awful lot of us, there is an awful lot that we can do to really improve our quality of life long term.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And I think this is the thing. It's important for people to understand that, because it is very easy to lose hope, right? And there's been
Yeah.
times, even for me, just waking up in the morning, and I dream of walking with my children and running. And there's been so many times where I've had dreams where I've woken up and I'm so happy. And then all of a sudden you know, I've been having to wear like these foot like these little beauties.
Yeah.
I don't need to wear them anymore, thank God. But they're just casts, for those who are listening, that they cast your feet so they kind of stay at upright position. And recently my physio said to me, look, you don't need to wear them anymore now because you're walking every day, you're going to the gym, and I'm doing my stretches. These aren't necessary. But I feel for people because, it is easy, even for me. Sometimes I wake up and I'm like, I gotta get on the crutches. This morning my legs were heavy.
Yeah.
I completely misread or completely forgot that I had a physio session. So I went to the gym, actually did my first proper leg session. Nothing kind of major, but I just did a little bit more work than I could, because now I have the ankle bracelets or the ankle splints. I can actually do more things as a complete leg workout, which has been helping, and it's been helping with me standing, walking, mobility, everything. So I thought, oh, let me go and do that. Got home, got in a shower. We were just about to leave to go take the kids to the cinema. There's a knock at the door. And it's my physio. And I had completely forgot that she had turned that, that we had a session. So we went through the session, and I unfortunately, my legs, I overdid it slightly,
Yeah.
you know, and my left leg in particular. My right leg is fine, but my left leg, being the weaker one at the moment, um, was affected by it. And I woke up this morning and at one point I had my crutches and I can walk bare feet now. I thought I was going to topple over. And these are the things that, we take for granted, and for those of you who are listening, who are going through this journey, and you wake up and some days you're going to feel great, but there are some days, and there will be moments like that where I wake up and go, oh, for Christ's sake, and I'm trying to shut the door behind me, because my wife's having a little bit of a longer sleep. We kind of alternate with the kids who wakes up in the
Yeah.
morning, and today was my day to wake up with them. And those things sometimes, can take their toll, and with kids running around. I've got 4 children. Two of them are grown-ups, 26 and 19, and then I've got a 2 and a 5-year-old. And the 2 and 5-year-old are beautiful, but they're children, and they
Yeah.
have
Hard
energy.
work.
They're full of beans.
Yeah.
They're full of beans. And, all of these things we have to take into consideration. So, be one of the advices I'd give to anybody, and this is something that even I struggle with, and I have to remind myself, and I specialize in mental health and addiction, so these are things that I practice and still struggle with, is being patient, be very patient with yourself, be very kind to yourself, as you're going through this journey, and where you can, do what you can, as Lydia has shown through her journey. Just do one little bit at a time, even it is for the first part of your morning. I used to, I shared my workouts and things that I was doing, and I purely just shared because I don't really know what I was going through. I don't really know what I got myself into, and I didn't really know how this was going to pan out. So I wanted to sort of share things with people in the groups, that we're in, particularly for guidance. Is this okay? Am I doing the right things?
Yeah.
And also, this is what I'm doing, guys. Is it working for you? As a community, is this of benefits? And which is why I wanted to start to do this as well, to reach a sort of a further audience.
And I think that's really worthwhile, because there really isn't, once you get discharged from physio, which you're not there yet, but, after about 6 months or so, I think I was discharged from physio, and they said to me, you'll never drive a manual car again. You'll have to get an automatic, which I did. You won't be able to go back to work. And definitely when I went to OT to go back to work, they said, had I worked on a ward, I probably wouldn't have been able to go back to work, because I wouldn't have been able to respond to a cardiac arrest and lift patients. Not that you're kind of supposed to lift, but in an emergency. So, but I think you can definitely prove these people wrong. But it is a journey. It is hard work, and once certain things like that have finished, you are kind of on your own to find your way as best you can through the rest of it. And I suppose you've got 2 years to work really hard. I mean, there's still opportunity for improvement after that, as I have seen myself by being in the gym 7 years later, which has really surprised me. But the biggest gains will be in those 2 years. So maximize that, tap into everything you can, every resource you can. Your podcasts are an amazing thing to do to help get information and hope out there, because we are a very scattered, small community with very different experiences, very different resources, and we only really have each other for longer term support and help to hopefully get more people. I mean, you've made amazing progress in the 3 months since your injury. You've made really good strides, and that is, a lot of that is going to have been down to you and the effort that you've put in and the dedication that you've put in to it. So I think there's every reason for people to be hopeful and be positively encouraged that their efforts, however futile they may seem, with their bloody foot still not moving 2 months later, you will get there. And if you just persevere, it definitely will help.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things I'd love to get your take on, because as we know, and we've touched on this a number of times, this journey is so up and down, so diverse, and it's an ongoing journey. What, if anything, what do you do, or what have you done to help you with that mindset? Because one of the things that has helped me was, or is, the mindset. Is that mindset of, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. I mean, I'm going to recover. I'm going to do everything in my power, to get to where I want to be. And just, even through those tough times, and there's been times where I've cried to my wife a number of times, and there's been times when I thought, man, like, this sucks, this is shit, and I don't know if you've had a fall. I've had a number of just little slips, thank God nothing major. And there'd been times when I've laughed about it, and there's been times when it really scared me, because he just caught me out of the blue. What is it that you've kind of put into practice that people can take away, that has helped you around your mindset, and to kind of get and achieve, to run a marathon, just to train for one when you're just fully healthy, is something that takes a lot of strong mindset to do. To go through your journey and to be where you are right now, what are the things that you've done?
I guess it's different for everybody. I consider myself very lucky in that I came from a sporting background. In my youth, I swam for Great Britain, so I know what discipline and training is. I know how hard it is, and I know that I can survive it, and that I hate swimming. I did it as part of my rehab, but it's the only swimming I've done since I left competitive swimming 35, 40 years ago now. And
Wow.
and I did it as part of my rehab because I know the benefits of it, but I hated every minute of it. And I was very fit doing other forms of exercise before. And I suppose, and I can honestly say, New Year's Eve 7 years ago was a beautifully sunny, cold, crisp day. I was in the park doing British military fitness, clearly had a totally rubbish squatting technique, because I think it's my poor technique that led to my injury. So I would say to anyone, if you're going to do things like squats and lunges, for God's sake, make sure that you know how to do them properly, because I'm absolutely convinced that my poor technique is because it went during squats, was my technique. And I think it's just a determination that, I was loving life. I was in a great place. And all of a sudden I lost that overnight. And, I was really low for a while and found it incredibly difficult that, I was in a great place and all of a sudden I was having to deal with not being able to do anything and bladder and bowel problems, which are not very sexy. When you've not been divorced very long and you're trying to find new relationships, it's not a great place to be. So I think it was just, I almost felt I had no choice. I almost felt that I was not prepared to accept a life that I didn't want to live. And so I had to do this for my own ability to survive the next, what I hope will be 30, 40 years of my life with any form of quality. And yeah, I had really down days. And yes, I got very angry and very upset at times and would cry for the loss of the life that I had and I thought I was going to have, and having to come to terms with that change, but making a decision that I was going to do my very best to ensure that that change was a positive one. And I can honestly say 7 years later, I'm back to where I was 7 years ago mentally. It's taken a long time. I'm not, I'm clearly not running in the way that I'd like to. I have issues with my leg. I have issues with my bowels with running, all things that I probably wouldn't have had. But I'd have had other issues in life, right? It's full of ups and downs. Life is never, an upward trajectory. It's always up and down. So I suppose it's just making a decision that I'm going to do the very best that I can. And that sounds easy and it sounds a bit flippant really, but it's actually not that easy. But just every day have to wake up and say, no, I am going to do this. It's tough and it's hard, but I will feel better for having tried. If I try and fail, at least I can live with myself knowing that I've tried.
Yeah. And that's perfectly said, because there's nothing worse than living with regret or dying with regret, which I think in the work that I do is, something that we see a lot, people that really face those moments of regret and, wish that they could have done things differently. And if there is one thing that I've learned from this, is there is no amount of money on the planet that can buy you health, that can buy you life, that can buy you, the ability to be alive and experience life, and if you are, the one listening, that one person who's going through this journey at the moment, but you have the ability to, to do something about it, if it's not permanent, then do it, do it. Take the chance, take the leap, have that faith. And as Lydia says, and I'll second that, one of the things that I do is I just keep it in the day. That's one of the things I've learned when I came into recovery. I was busted and broken and I tried to kill myself and I had overdoses. But one of the things that was taught to me is just keep it in the day, because tomorrow doesn't even exist. There is no tomorrow. There's only today. We have this illusion that, we can do this tomorrow, but tomorrow we might never wake up. So, and when we do wake up, it's today, it's now. So the truth in the matter is simplify things to the best that you can. And that has helped me massively, really has helped me. And when I'm struggling through something, I can deal with that struggle in the now, and by being able to do that has allowed me to just not only deal with things a little bit more efficiently, but actually get to know myself a little bit more. You talked about, grieving that old person, the person who was before this happened. And the same thing happened with me. I went through this grieving process, and that's why I understand it to be. It's a grieving process.
Yeah.
And in the work that I do, we call it, it's the death of the old, the death of the old us. And this is the rebirth of a new version of us. So there is an opportunity here as well, for us to rebirth, to create something new, to create a new chapter. And I'm going to go out and even say this, even to the people who are paralyzed, who don't have full function, below the waist, let's say, what's stopping you from being the best version that you can be then? you know because and we've seen, I certainly have seen people who have lost their limbs, who have lost their legs and their arms, and and they're public speakers, and not to say that this is going to happen to all of us, but what I am saying is, so long as we have the breath in our bodies that we can get up every single day, there is an opportunity for us to do something different. And I truly believe in my heart that, these things happen to us for a reason, and it gives us an opportunity to find something that, that we haven't found in ourselves before. And when we allow ourselves to do that, we can teach and possibly even help other people, in their journeys as well.
Yeah, I would certainly agree with that. I mean, look at all those Paralympians out there. They all, well, not all, but the vast majority probably had fully functioning limbs at one point, and through illness or accident, their lives changed. And that's not to say everyone can be a Paralympian, but it just highlights the fact that, even if you are very sadly paralyzed from the waist down, there are still directions in life that you could consider taking that perhaps you'd never have considered before, that can give fulfillment and meaning to what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the things that I encourage anybody, really go within. That's one of the things that I've learned from this journey, and which is why I asked you about, kind of the mindset, because that's something I work with a lot. And I've had to, with having no clients now, I've had to really work on myself. And one of the things I've always prided myself in was only teaching people things that I've done myself, and if there is one thing this journey has taught me, is to further go within, and to really, and I invite anybody who's going through, through this journey, because mentally, this is the number one thing we need to overcome first, because I believe, and I've seen it, myself, and I've had to really, I've been placed in this journey. So, the only work I can do is on myself. And one of the things that I'd invite anybody to do, if you're struggling at the moment, is just go within, and really connect with who you are as a person. The mystery of life is that we don't get given a manual for life. We don't get given a manual for this. There is no, as Lydia said, life is not a straight line. There is ups and downs. But these ups and downs, as I have discovered, when we go through these downs, the only way is you're going to hit a bottom, and then there's only up, you know. But by going into these bottoms, if you can go within and truly find out what you're made of and understand is where, because in life there's only two choices, positive or negative. There's nothing really in between, when we kind of look at it. And if you can make a decision or a choice and kind of understand, okay, I don't want to live like this. I want to have some quality of life, whatever that may look like for you, and if you can go within and discover, one of the things I'm discovering right now is, what's the one thing that's going to make you happy? Because you can have the worst day, but the solution out of that is you want to feel a little bit happy. Like today I woke up, I felt a little bit wobbly, and I sat down. What's the first thing I want to do? Is I just want to give my kids a hug, because that always makes me feel happy. So I wobbled my way to the sofa, gave them both a hug. They wanted to watch kids' TV, and I was good. That made me happy. And I'm starting to discover that when we go through these tough times, there is always a bright light at the end of that tunnel. Where generally what that tends to be is a little bit of happiness, even if it's a glimpse or a glimmer. Is it picking up the phone? Is it texting somebody? Is it reading something that's going to make you feel positive? And, that for me has always been, I found that has given me a little bit of a charge, a little bit of energy. And, you know, Lydia, you know, when you're going through, or when you've gone through some of these tough times,
Oh, that'll be back.
how is it, how is that?
Sorry.
That's okay.
Thank you. So sorry, just had to get that.
No worries. That's fine.
I think one of the things that sorry, I'll sit back down.
Mhm.
One of the things that helped me with the mental side of things, and certainly in the rehab, was to set myself little goals every day, even if it was just to get up and made sure I had a shower that day, because initially that was really hard work and a lot of effort with bathing chairs and showers and just the effort to try and get in and out of a shower. And gradually, as I got stronger, different goals. And it may be just saying, okay, I'm going to go to the pool, the hydrotherapy on these days at this time, and writing it down and holding myself accountable for achieving those little goals. I'm going to do my foot exercises 10 times today. So I think setting little daily goals can be really helpful, you know, that are appropriate to you and where you're at. And the other thing that really helped me with my mental journey was thinking, I want to be a positive influence for my children. You know, I'm in this difficult position. They are going to have difficulties in their life. They may not be this difficulty. They may be divorced. They may be losing a job. There may be illnesses. There may be other difficulties, but they are going to, no matter how much we want to protect them, they're going to have difficulties and challenges in life. So actually, if I can show them how I can overcome this to my best ability and try to make the best of my situation and work hard at trying to improve my situation and trying to stay positive more than negative. And there are days when we all get negative and low, and that's normal. You know, none of us is perfect. But if on balance, I can be a positive inspiration to my children, then I'm hoping that observing that will help them in the difficulties that they have in life to try and overcome them. They can think, well, look, you know, Christ, look at mum, you know, she ended up with 5 spinal surgeries and all that rehab she had to do over and over again. And then she went and run the London Marathon. I mean, you know, wow, if she can do that, you know, I can get through this. Whatever I'm going through, I can get through it. So I think that helps, and that does help me when I'm out there running and really not necessarily enjoying it, but feeling it's something I need to do. So so I think we can be an inspiration to people around us too.
I truly believe that, and which is why I like sharing, you know, and hearing stories, you know, from other people, because I think it's so important for us to be able to, especially as we're going through difficult times in general, globally. You know, there's so much going on right now. And one of the things for me, which, you know, I find important is community, you know, is for us to always remember that we're there for each other, you know, and that we are going to go through difficult times, you know, and that we're gonna struggle. But there is that solution, and often that could be, you know, a hug from a child, a hug from a parent, you know, a hug from a friend, a text, a phone call, something, just reaching out, asking for help, and just remembering that you're not on your own. Because I think, you know, when we go into that negative mindset and experiencing feelings and emotions, it's very easy over time, and very quickly too, to forget who's around us, you know, and to remember that we're not on our own, you know, and to remember that there is support out there, and there is people who do care about us. You know, so always remember, always connect with that, which I think is important. Just one of the things I wanted to ask you, because you mentioned about family, you mentioned about your children. How difficult was it, you know, for you, you know, when you came out of your operation, how did it affect, family, partners? Because that's something that, my wife and I have been going through. That's been tough sometimes on us. We both work full time. We both have our own businesses, and there's been times all of a sudden that, I couldn't work, and I haven't been able to work for months, and we've been, we're very fortunate in a position that we're in, but we generally tend to be very 50-50 in what we do, at home, with the children, with work, with everything. We always tend to communicate very well, and we have our, our duties, things that we do.
Yeah, blue jobs and pink jobs.
Exactly, yeah. But all of a sudden, it's kind of just become, all of a sudden, for a period, a lot of the jobs have been down to her, especially when I was in hospital. And when I came out, there was still a lot of difficulties for me, moving around and getting about. Um, how was that for you? And, what kind of advice would you give, potentially couples? Because I've heard and I've seen sometimes in groups where partners have left, individuals because of what they're going through, and that's heartbreaking. When people are having to go through these experiences. What's been your experience, and what's your advice?
Well, I was actually on my own when I had my injury. My children are grown up.
Mm.
So I came home to being by myself, which was incredibly difficult.
Mm-hmm.
And so lots of things didn't get done to start with. I'd been divorced for 2 years, and I'd got a grown-up family. I mean, obviously, when I had my injury initially, everybody was extremely worried and very shocked, and very concerned that all of a sudden their mum is going to be disabled, because initially I was in a wheelchair. So and I'm sure there was part of them that was thinking, oh Christ, what happens if this is permanent? Am I going to have to be a carer for my mum? They didn't voice that directly because they're not quite that insensitive, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm certain that was going through their mind, and potentially, my injury could have had a very negative effect on, their future and their feeling of responsibility for me.
Mm-hmm.
I did actually meet my husband later on, probably about 5 months later after my injury.
Mm-hmm.
At that stage, I was walking with a stick, so it wasn't quite so bad. I'd managed to get to that. And, initially, I didn't kind of say an awful lot about the realities of my situation. I certainly wasn't going to start telling or doing intermittent self-catheterization in front of him, or explaining about some of my my bowel difficulties. And even today, when I let wind, he'll forget and say, really, could you gone outside to do that? And I have to remind him and say, I'm really sorry, but I have no warning. I have absolutely, clearly I wouldn't deliberately just tromp in front of you.
Yeah.
But I have no warning. So there are still some things he's getting used to. So dating with some of the difficulties we have, I do have some sexual feeling, probably not as much as I used to. I consider myself very lucky being a female, that, I don't have to worry about erectile dysfunction. And that even though sex may not be for me what it once was, from my partner's point of view, it doesn't affect his pleasure or enjoyment necessarily. So that has been something to get used to, but I think in the scheme of things, I'm probably a little luckier than most, and certainly, luckier than a man would be in my situation, because I still have the ability to pleasure my partner. I'm sure men have the ability to pleasure their partners too, but for themselves, it's different. And I'm guessing, but you would know potentially better than me.
Yeah, and for me, this is something which, again, being very new, getting an erection is actually been okay.
Good.
And it's recently that we've managed to sort of connect and and have a sexual experience. And I said to my wife, "Wow, this is very different because the sensation, some of it just wasn't there as
Yeah.
it was, and we've always been very connected and very sexual. So this is something that I'm having to kind of get used to. She's having to get used to as well. But we're not one of these people that just give up. We were just like,
No.
okay. And I turned around and said to her, I certainly don't want to give up because it works.
Yeah, it
For me, it's
works.
just a sensation.
And you can get improvement in that feeling too. I can honestly say
Mm.
that side of things has very much improved over the years. I didn't lose it completely. Maybe not quite what it was, but certainly extremely pleasurable still. And I may not be quite as mobile in the bedroom as I used to be. But it certainly hasn't prevented me from going, from a sexual point of view, it hasn't prevented me from going on, meeting a new partner, and having a very healthy sex life. Bladder and bowel things were not something that I brought into the relationship early on. It took a long time for me to feel comfortable and secure in the relationship to be able to share what they were. And even now, I probably wouldn't catheterize in front of him. It's something I only have to do it twice a day, so it's easy for me to make that a more private thing. And he was very good the other day when I came back from a run and said, because we've got a family here, I said, can you make sure there's some knickers in the downstairs loo for me? So he knew exactly what was going on there and was very good. And everything just went straight in the washing machine or the bin. So I don't overshare those things, but he is aware and very, very supportive. So managed to navigate round those not so great parts of cauda equina.
Yeah. And I think this is what's important, isn't it? Is having those, just having the ability to know that, that your partner is there, and can be there, when you need to. And I think having conversations if and when needed as well, I think it's important. This is one of the things I've learned, with both of us. Our communication has had to go to another level, to really make sure that things are crystal clear. We're very clear on things. Even yesterday, we sat down and we went through our goals, for 2024. What do we want to do? What do we want to achieve? And, because we want to have, a lifestyle that we want to live in, and I'm certainly not going to let this affect it, not for me, not for my children. And, certainly I want to try to help myself as much as I possibly can, and in turn, hopefully by doing this, we can pay it forward somehow. Any final thoughts, advice, just kind of any final thoughts from you, Lydia?
No, I think we've covered most things. I don't think there's much left to say other than please try and get hydrotherapy as soon as you can. I think it's really important. If you have bladder and bowel problems, please try and get access to a specialist physio in that area, and do talk about these things. And it's okay to, even if you're not in a wheelchair, it's okay to still grieve the life you don't have. Yes, I'm fortunate that I've made a recovery, but that doesn't mean it's been easy, and that doesn't mean there haven't been losses and things along the way. And it's okay, even if you're not in a wheelchair, it's okay to feel bad about the things that you've lost, even though obviously there are people worse off than us. I think it's important to talk and get the help that you need for that, and the support, and just try and be strong and tough and work really hard, especially in those first 2 years, and don't give up hope, because there is lots of room for improvement.
Yeah, that's it. And I think it's important, I think, to um, just be kind to yourself,
Yeah.
take time in what you're doing. And there is always a way, even through the difficult times, and stay connected. So yeah, listen, guys, as always, thank you so much for listening. Lydia, thank you so much for coming on.
Pleasure.
Best of luck with the marathon.
Thank you. I'm
I
going to
definitely
need
want to
it.
catch
I'll
up
let you
with
know
you.
how I get on.
Yeah, let's do a second episode, because I would love to really get you to talk about that, because what an achievement. And I'm honestly,
Well, I think, honestly, I think the hardest thing is getting to the start line. The next 3 months are going to be really tough. It's tough for anybody.
yeah,
I'll be 57 when I run it. Got, all sorts of, joint and hip and foot problems and things to overcome. So if I get to the start line, I'm pretty confident I'll finish
yeah,
one way or another.
yeah.
But yeah, I just hope I get there.
Oh, you will, you will. I'm going to send you loads of prayer and love and
Thank you.
healing, whatever you need to make sure that you do, because
Maybe
I'm
we'll
so
have to run
excited
it.
for you.
Maybe we'll have to run it together one year to raise money for cauda equina and spinal
Yes.
injuries.
Yeah, 100%. I'm with you. You actually inspired me. I said to my wife, I can't wait to talk to you, because what you've achieved in doing this. You get to that start line and you finish. I'll be next to you on the next
Thank
one.
you.
I promise, because that will be a determined. That's one of the things I've never done. And I'll do everything that I can, even if I have to hop my way to it. I will
I'll
join you.
give you the next 2 to 3 years to get there,
Let's do it.
and you
Let's
will.
do it. I will.
Keep
Listen, guys,
going.
have an amazing one. Thank you so much,
Pleasure.
and we'll see you
Take
soon.
care.
Take care.
Thanks for listening. And if you want to find out more about how you can overcome issues caused by mental health, go to alexdasilva.co.uk. That's www.alexdasilva.co.uk. See you on the next one. Be great, be fantastic, and be absolutely phenomenal. Take care.